From ancient fossils to strange objects and hidden treasure, you never know what's gonna lie beneath your backyard. Join me for today. I'm exploring 15 of the most unusual backyard discoveries. Starting with number 15, a World War II bomb. During the Second World War, countless bombs were dropped across Europe. Now, these did untold damage, but a surprising number of them failed to detonate, instead lodging deep into the ground and eventually being covered up and forgotten about. Ever since, people have occasionally uncovered them, and even though they're more than 70 years old, they still have a potential to explode. Luckily, they can usually be managed fairly simply, but things reached a level of real concern in February of 2024 when a homeowner in Plymouth in the UK found a large unexploded bomb in his backyard when digging the foundations for a new building. At first, he thought it was just a piece of metal, but as he dug around it, he soon realized what it was. Weighing just over 1,100 pounds or about 500 kilograms, it was one of almost 1,400 bombs that were dropped on the city in the war. And without knowing why it had failed, there was no way to safely perform the controlled explosion. Instead, police were forced to create a huge exclusion zone, which saw more than 10,000 people being ordered to evacuate their homes. Army experts then removed the bomb and transported it by truck along a 1-mile route through the city before loading it onto a boat. It was then taken out to the English Channel and detonated out at sea. From what began as a simple home construction project, it turned into a hugely disruptive event, and one that could easily happen again with hundreds more devices like it still thought to be buried around the country. Number 14. False teeth. One of the great things about having a backyard is that if you've got pets, it gives a safe space for them to run around. Of course, this also means that if you have a particularly curious dog, they may start digging around and finding objects that are buried. In 2017, an owner in Sao Paulo, Brazil had left his dog to play in the garden all afternoon, but when the time came for dinner, he called the dog back in. Needless to say, nothing could have prepared him for what was about to happen, because Pandora, his dog, came running back into the house with a set of false teeth in her mouth. After taking some photos, he removed them and looked out into the garden to see the hole where Pandora had found them, presumably having been left there by the old couple who had lived there previously. Quite why they would have left a set of dentures in the garden isn't entirely clear though, but it made for a fun afternoon for Pandora and her owner, with the images being shared across the world. Number 13. A diamond carrot. Wedding rings are some of the most valuable and sentimental things that people wear, but it's often easy to lose them without realizing. That's what happened to Mary Grams from Canada in 2004 when she was removing weeds from her family farm. And after only noticing at the end of the day that the ring was gone, there was no way for her to find it. Instead of telling her husband, she bought a cheaper replacement ring for herself and pretended like nothing had happened. And for years, the only other person who knew the truth was her son. Amazingly though, in the summer of 2017, her daughter-in-law, who now lives on the farm, had decided to go out to harvest some vegetables from the farm for dinner, and noticed something peculiar about one of the carrots when she was washing it. Rather than being lumpy like she had thought, this carrot had somehow managed to grow through the missing ring, and as it was being cleaned, she saw the sparkle of the diamond. Her husband knew immediately what it was and how it had gotten there, and phoned his mom, who was overjoyed to have it back. Unfortunately, she never had the chance to tell her husband what had happened, but it put an end to the 13-year-old mystery. Strangely, this isn't the only story of a ring being returned by a carrot, with a similar thing happening in Sweden in 2011. It turns out that the vegetables are just the right size and grow in just the right way to go through finger-sized objects. So next time you pull up one from the ground, you never know what you might find. Number 12. Medieval jewels. In 2007, an Austrian man in Wiener Neustadt, which is a town in the south of Vienna, was beginning a project to expand the pond in his backyard when he noticed something strange. The soil that he was removing wasn't like you'd normally expect, and was instead coming out in strange-shaped clumps. Thinking it was something worth looking into further, he put all the clumps in a box that he stored in his basement, but then, for some reason, completely forgot about them. It was only a few years later that he came across them again while sorting through his belongings after selling his house, and by this time the dirt had dried up and had fallen away to reveal a collection of what appeared to be gems and precious metals. He cleaned them up further and posted some photos of them online, and soon received a number of responses saying that not only were they likely very old, but also quite valuable. It was at this point that the authorities were notified, and in a statement, the department responsible for national antiquities in Austria said that the trove contained more than 200 rings, brooches, belt buckles, gold-plated silver plates, and various other ornaments that included pieces with pearls and even fossilized coral. Also confirming that they were at least 650 years old. This was one of the most significant finds of artifacts in Austria from this time period. But the reason why they were all together and buried in this particular spot is still a complete mystery. While the man who found them remains anonymous and has refused to sell them, a selection of the pieces is now on display at the Hofburg Palace complex in an exhibit showcasing the region's history. Number 11. A time capsule. People have been burying time capsules for hundreds of years, with the oldest known one dating back to about 1795 when it was buried at the Massachusetts State House by the then governor. And they often provide a unique glimpse into history, containing objects from society at the time that would have otherwise been lost and completely forgotten about. Not all time capsules are so old though, and in early 2024, a man from Springfield, Missouri found one that, while it was in more recent times, was a great reminder of life just a few decades ago. Stephen Graff was planning some construction work in his home, and after opening up a space in the backyard, one of the workers found a rusty coffee can that was filled with a variety of objects. There was a letter in it there dated January 12, 1994, and a message from a 12-year-old boy saying that it was a time capsule that shouldn't be opened before 2010. As a fascinating reminder of the early 1990s, the tin contained an action figure from the original Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles cartoon, a tailspin figurine that had come from a cereal box, a Pog cap and a slammer, a sticker and song lyrics from The Lion King, and a label from a pack of Oscar Mayer Little Smoky sausages. Also, a fake $50 bill and 3 football trading cards featuring John Randall, Keith McKellar, and Kent Hull. The story didn't end there though, because he put the images of the contents of the time capsule online, and it wasn't long before people had tracked down the person who had created it and found him to now be a financial services manager in Texas. He didn't remember making the time capsule, but for him, it was a great reminder of his early childhood. Number 10. 34-million-year-old whale fossil. Lindsay Stallworth grew up on a large timber property in Monroe County, Alabama, and all her life had collected various fossils from the backyard. Usually they were shark teeth and ancient shells, but there wasn't a way for her to find out more about them, so in 2023 she invited her biology teacher to collect some of the teeth to study. What they would find, though, would surprise everyone. After picking a spot, they began finding small bones, and as they kept digging, they kept finding even larger ones. They then found a huge tooth and knew they were onto something particularly special. Then, by scraping dirt away with dental picks, they revealed a skull. It turned out to be the remains of an ancient whale that would have swum in the ocean above Alabama around 34 million years ago, and likely measured between 4 to 5 feet. Thought to be a previously unknown relative of the Basilosaurus centoidus, which was one of the most common whale species in the area at that time, it's possible that this was a complete fossil of the whale, but it'll be some time before they know for sure. With the remains being so delicate and of such a large creature, it'll probably take several years until it's fully excavated, but once it is, we'll hopefully reveal more about the species that lived in this prehistoric ocean. Finds of this size are extremely rare, especially so close to the surface, but with many of us living in places that were once covered by water, you could well have an ancient creature buried beneath your backyard too. Number 9. A menhir. People often start researching the history of their own houses, especially if they're ones that have been there for a long time. But one homeowner turned amateur historian began a quest in 1987 that led to an amazing discovery in his backyard. Stephen Davies had moved into a new property in Stroud in Gloucestershire, England. When he started to sift through documents related to it, he found a mention of an ancient monument called the Whorestone. After working with a local historian, he found that the first mention of the object was in a legal document from more than 800 years ago, in 1170, but the last written record about it was in a tax record from 1636. It seemed like it had simply vanished, and people who lived in the village for decades hadn't even heard of it. But Davies was convinced that it must be somewhere, so he started to search. Believed to have been sculpted more than 4,500 years ago as part of a Bronze Age burial site, he suspected it may have been moved or even destroyed because it was believed to have magical powers. Eventually, though, after months of searching the land around his house, he discovered a huge ivy-covered rock that, against all odds, turned out to be the Whorestone. Looking like a decaying tree stump, he pulled the vines away from the 6-foot-tall stone, and it's now seen as such an important discovery for the history of the area that it's been declared a protected ancient monument. Number 8. Nuclear Fallout Shelter. The Cold War was a frightening time for people across the planet, with the seemingly constant threat that within moments nuclear war could break out. This led to countries building even larger stockpiles of weaponry and the construction of fallout shelters to provide refuge should the worst happen, something that fortunately never did take place. The remains, though, can still be seen all over, and a homeowner in Tucson, Arizona recently shared a discovery that he made in his own backyard. He had no idea there was anything unusual on his property, but received a message from a previous owner that there was something there, so he went to investigate. After locating city records of a construction, and with the use of a metal detector, he soon found a circular hatch which was upside down, and after removing it, revealed the crumbled steps that led to a fallout shelter below. Built in 1961 by a company called Whitaker Pools, which specialized in shelters like these at the time, the walls of the shelter were made from concrete with a fiberglass dome on top. Seemingly closed off on purpose, the shelter had no furniture or equipment in it, but the owner now plans on restoring it to its former glory. While it may seem extreme to have built a shelter like this in his backyard, residents in Tucson were acutely aware of the risks of a nuclear strike at the time. Between the 1960s and 80s, at least 18 intercontinental ballistic missiles with nuclear warheads were positioned in the Sonora Desert around the city, making it more of a potential target than most other cities. Moving on to number 7, the mystery transparent object. In 2014, 2 sisters in Kitchener, Canada were preparing for a fishing trip, so they went in their backyard to dig up some worms. Over the years, they had found a number of strange objects in the ground, such as plaques and old newspapers, but this time they found something much stranger. Buried deep in the earth, they uncovered a large object, described as being the same size as a child's head, shiny and transparent with a slight bluish tint. Neither they nor their parents had any idea what it might be, so they contacted local mineral experts to see if they could shed some light. One of the first suggestions was that it could have been from a fragment of a meteorite that was known to have fallen in the area within the previous month. But if it was, it would have had a darker outer surface and wouldn't have been buried so deep, so that was ruled out. Another expert from a local gem and mineral club was able to confirm that if it wasn't glass, quartz, diamond, or ruby, and that it was unlikely to have been naturally formed, it was instead placed by someone in the backyard. Hoping to finally solve the mystery, the family sent the strange object to a local university for further testing, and unfortunately, the result wasn't exactly as exciting as they may have been hoping for. It turned out that this was simply a piece of colored glass that's commonly sold in a wide range of different colors and used to make garden ornaments. In fact, there are shops all over the United States that sell large lumps like this, and it was probably just left there by a previous owner. Number 6. Buried statues. So one of the most exciting things about finding something buried in your backyard is the mystery and intrigue as you begin to dig around and reveal the object. But there are times when this can prove to be a worrying and disturbing thing too. This is what happened to a woman from Washington in 2022 when she was pulling weeds from a hillside on her property and noticed a strange shape inside one of the holes that she had made. She started digging around it and soon realized that it was an arm. As she continued, she found a female torso and another human shape that seemed to be male, and her imagination ran wild trying to understand what this was. Both the bodies were wearing what appeared to be underwear, and then it all made sense. These were casts that had been made of people, and there was nothing sinister about them at all, even if they were somewhat bizarre. Also next to them was an empty jar of petroleum jelly, which is often used in the creation of plaster casts like these. So it seems she stumbled across a home project, possibly by a group of art students that had once lived in the house. Neighbors told them that the previous owners were hoarders, and the backyard was once full of unusual objects, so it's quite possible that these casts were simply part of that collection. Number 5. Mastodon Fossils. In late 2014, Daniel LaPointe Jr. from Bellevue Township in Michigan had agreed to help his neighbor to excavate his backyard. So, thinking this would be like any other job, he started digging into the ground. It wasn't long ago until the thing started taking a surprising turn, because fairly close to the surface he uncovered what he believed to be a large dinosaur fossil. He called his neighbor into the yard to see the 4-foot bone, and they both excitedly began digging around it, and amazingly began to discover other bones. In all, over a period of 4 days, they recovered 42 large bones, but they weren't from an ancient dinosaur, but were later determined to be from a mastodon. There were leg bones, shoulder and hip bones, the base of a tusk, and several vertebrae, and they called experts at the local museum to try to find out more about them. The mastodon, which was believed to have been a 37-year-old male, would have lived around 10 to 14,000 years ago, but with the animals usually living only 10 or 20 years longer than this, it's most likely that these were the remains of one that had been hunted by humans. The marks on the bones were consistent with those made by tools that are used to remove all of the flesh to eat, with the animal probably having provided enough meat for a whole community to survive for a week or so. It wasn't the first set of mastodon remains to have been found in the region. Within that year alone, more than 330 bones found in Michigan. Most of these also showed signs of human activity, and from this, historians are able to deduce a lot about how ancient peoples lived towards the end of the Ice Age. Number 4. The Saddle Ridge Hoard. The Saddle Ridge Hoard is undoubtedly one of the most important historical finds in the U.S., and by far the most valuable trove of treasure to ever be found in the country. It was discovered in February of 2013 in the Gold Country region of Sierra Nevada, California, by a couple known only as John and Mary while they were walking their dog on their property. The couple noticed a rusted can sticking up from the ground, and once they had unearthed it, they found that it was filled with gold coins. They began digging around the site to see if there were any more, and amazingly, they would go on to find a total of 8 cans, all of which were filled with 19th century U.S. gold coins. Now known as the Saddle Ridge Hoard, there were 1,427 coins made up of mainly $20 gold pieces, known as double eagles, along with some $10 gold coins called eagles, and a few $5 ones, which are called half eagles. All dating from 1847 to 1894, which was a significant period in American history from the California Gold Rush to the years leading up to the Gilded Age. The total face value of the hoard was just under $28,000. But their rarity and condition, with some of them considered the best of their kind in existence, meant that their market value to collectors was significantly higher, with estimates ranging from $10 million upwards. Beyond the monetary value, the discovery of this hoard also captured the public's imagination, with countless theories about its origin, ranging from it being the stash of a wealthy 19th century individual to the more fanciful tales involving bank robberies and hidden loot from stagecoach heists. The truth of the hoard, however, remains a mystery, as no historical records have been found to definitively explain how or why the coins were buried. What makes it even trickier to figure out is that the condition of the coins suggests they were buried shortly after being minted, as many were in almost uncirculated condition, with some still displaying their original luster. Quite why someone would bury so many brand new coins and simply leave them there will probably never be known, and it only adds to the fascination of this hoard. Number 3. A huge Roman villa. It's of course possible to find something in your backyard by complete accident, but often the greatest and most significant discoveries of all are made by people who have meticulously researched the history of their property and actively gone out to look for something in particular. That's exactly what happened near Broughton Castle in Oxfordshire, England, where a landowner eventually, after years of searching, uncovered a Roman villa. Now the second largest Roman villa found in England, and dating back almost 2,000 years, it's proven to be hugely important in our understanding of what life was like back then. The villa was uncovered by Keith Westcott, an amateur detectorist and historian, who's curious about the site in one of his fields after hearing stories of a large stone that had been found by a local farmer in 1963. This stone, upon further inspection, revealed a human bone, but nothing else was found, as it was thought to be a misplaced artifact. Westcott thought otherwise, though. By using modern technology, was able to scan beneath the ground and found the remains of a huge structure with a foundation measuring 278 feet by 278 feet. Once the outline had been found, he then worked with archaeologists to excavate the site, and this revealed far more than anyone had expected. Such discoveries suggest this villa was in place of considerable importance and likely owned by individuals of high status and wealth. By using cutting-edge techniques such as magnetometry, they were actually able to map out the villa's entire layout with extensive digging, and have so far uncovered walls, room outlines, ditches, and the probable locations of a bathhouse. This non-invasive approach has allowed for a detailed understanding of the site's scale and complexity without the risk of damaging it, allowing them to learn about the lives of the owners while continuing to preserve the remains. Number 2. A Ferrari. When you buy a new property, the one thing you may look for is a spacious garage to keep your car in, but you'd rarely expect for a supercar to actually be included in the purchase price. Probably the most unusual backyard discovery ever was just that, with a California resident making a stunning discovery in their own backyard in 1978. Almost like something out of a mystery novel, the homeowner's children were playing in the yard of a quiet neighborhood in Los Angeles when they found something hard beneath the dirt. What initially seemed to be a large stone or piece of debris turned out to be the roof of a car, and to their amazement, this was not an ordinary car. Further excavation would reveal it to be a Dino 246 GTS Ferrari, one of just 1,274 that were ever built, and highly sought after by collectors, because they're seen as one of the best cars the Italian company ever made. The family contacted the police, and as the car was further unearthed, things became even stranger. The Dino 246 GTS, known for its design and powerful V6 engine, was in surprisingly good condition given its burial, as whoever had left it there had wrapped it in carpets and left the windows open in an attempt to preserve it. But the subsequent investigation would go on to reveal a far more elaborate and devious plot. All cars have a serial number, so it was possible to identify the specific Ferrari that this was, and records showed that it had been reported stolen just 4 years prior to its discovery. It had belonged to a young businessman who was thought to have been the victim of a sophisticated insurance fraud scheme. The theory put forward by investigators is that the car was buried as part of an attempt to collect insurance money, while planning to later retrieve the vehicle. However, the people behind the scheme never returned for the Ferrari for some reason, possibly due to unexpected complications or simply the fear of being caught. Because of this, the family who owned the property and who found the car weren't actually allowed to keep it, and were instead paid an undisclosed finder's fee. The ownership reverted back to Farmers Insurance, which had paid out on the policy several years earlier, and the company then arranged for it to undergo a meticulous restoration process to return it to its former glory. Once this was done, it was sold to a real estate businessman who apparently still regularly drives it to this day, and is often seen with it at shows and classic races. Number 1. Sutton Hoo. With so many thousands of years of history and many different time periods, it's not all that unusual for residents in the UK to find old coins or artifacts in their backyards. They rarely are newsworthy or valuable though, and are more of a curiosity for local residents. But probably the most important archaeological discovery ever made in the country was amazingly found in someone's backyard. Sutton Hoo, as it's known, was founded in 1939 near Woodbridge in Suffolk, and it's a series of burial mounds that revealed a wealth of Anglo-Saxon artifacts from more than 1,300 years ago. The discovery was made on the estate of Edith Pretty, a landowner who had a keen interest in archaeology. She believed that a series of mounds on her property might hold historical significance, so she arranged for local archaeologist Basil Brown to help her investigate. Initially, Brown's excavations of the smaller mounds uncovered items from the 6th century, but it was in 1939 during World War II that the excavation of the largest mound revealed something completely unexpected: a large ship. Believed to date back to the early 7th century, the ship is thought to be the final resting place of an Anglo-Saxon king, possibly Raedwald of East Anglia. The 88-foot or 27-meter-long wooden ship had, of course, mostly decayed, but what was left was its impression and some of its iron rivets, and had clearly been used as a grave. Among the most impressive artifacts was the Sutton Hoo helmet, which is decorated with scenes of warriors and animals, a shield, a sword with gold fittings, silverware, and an ornate purse lid. Showcasing a mixture of Anglo-Saxon and foreign craftsmanship, it not only revealed a lot about Anglo-Saxon funerary rites, but it was evidence of a complex trade network across Europe that hadn't been known about. So important was this discovery that the site isn't a backyard anymore and is now managed by the National Trust to preserve it. A number of the artifacts are also on display at the British Museum in London, where further research and study into the finds is ongoing. Importantly, this was a time period known as the Dark Ages, which is often associated with a regression of society and a cultural decline. But an increasing number of finds like the ones at Sutton Hoo have now shed doubt over this narrative.